it kind of got me from a young age to get out of my comfort zone because I was a shy kid. And I just had to, try and engage with other people because otherwise I was just kind of, left to my own sort of devices, so to speak. And that kind of helped me because it kind of helped me from a young age to sort of, things to sort of embrace being uncomfortable.
Hey guys, I'm Devon Harris. Welcome to Keep On Pushing TV, where we share ideas and insights that are going to challenge and inspire you to keep on pushing and in the process live your absolute best life. And in this episode, I get to hang out with Lomit Patel, an author, speaker, a mentor to entrepreneurs, a man who has managed early startups such as EarthLink, Roku that went IPO, TrustedID acquired by Equifax, and Texture acquired by Apple. You'll hear his story of how in his early years he learned to become creative and innovative. Enjoy.
This is Keep On Pushing TV with Devon Harris.
So excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Devon.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for coming. So, look, impressive resume, and people look at it and go, "Wow." But I'm impressed. But I'm always curious, and I know anyone who listens to us knows that about the journey. So I would like you to take us back to 4, 5, 6-year-old Lomit and what life was like for him then.
Yeah, I would say, a big part of what I've ended up becoming today was really shaped when I was young. And so just to give people a preview into my childhood. So I would say my childhood was a little bit different probably from most people growing up. And what was different was I was the youngest of 4 kids. And my 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 parents lived in London and they had just started a business. And what they decided to do was to have me sort of go back and live with my grandparents and my uncles in East Africa. So I ended up going back and I spent all of my elementary school in Lilongwe in Malawi. And what I would say about that whole experience was from a young age, I wasn't around my parents, so I pretty much learned to grow up pretty quickly and become independent. And what I came to realize was nobody was going to come and give me attention or see like how things are going, how you're doing, blah blah blah. So it kind of got me from a young age to get out of my comfort zone because I was a shy kid. And I just had to, try and engage with other people because otherwise I was just kind of, left to my own sort of devices, so to speak. And that kind of helped me because it kind of helped me from a young age to sort of, things to sort of embrace being uncomfortable and figuring out how to sort of overcome that. And I was fortunate though, when I was in Lilongwe, I went to a really good private school there. And so the school, I was exposed to, a lot of kids that came from pretty well-to-do families, or there were kids that were like ambassadors, their parents that were very successful. And so what I came to realize was, because I was a daydreamer, I was a very curious kid. I used to like asking a lot of questions in class. And what I came to realize was that, for the most part, it made me begin to dream bigger. And it came because I came to realize that all of these other people at the end of the day were just like me as far as being humans, right? I mean, they had the same needs, they kind of eat and drink and sleep, all the same things. It's like, they're kind of just like me. The only difference is their parents made better choices in life, right? Which kind of put them into positions.
Did you
and
feel
so
like I'm sorry, did you feel like you're missing out, the fact that you weren't with your parents?
You know, when I, it's really funny. Like, you know, I probably spoke to my parents because in those days it was expensive to make international calls. I'd probably talk to them maybe once every couple of months or whatever. And after a while, you know, I mean, I would miss them. But after a while, I kind of got over it because I realized they weren't going to be there, and you know, there's no point kind of going through that whole cycle of, you know, feeling sorry for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
have to, you know, just accept the new reality of where I was. And I was fortunate. What I will say is that I did enjoy staying with my grandparents, my uncle, and I had a nephew. I mean, I had a cousin who was going to the same school, who's a little bit older. So I had, you know, a buddy to hang out with.
Right.
But the main thing for me was, you know, just learning to accept the realities that, you know, this is kind of, you know, my life. And you know, instead of dwelling on what could have been or should have been at that young age, I just started to dwell on what can I do to make the best out of the situation that I was in. And so I was able to, you know, get to know and get to know people from different parts of the world, and I saw that as a really positive. And so you know, for me, you know, the thing that really came out was there's the curiosity. And what I learned was ultimately, you know, it's always better to be more interested than to try and be interesting. So the more
Mm-hmm.
you sort of, you know, more you try to, you know, get people to talk about themselves, the more you can able to find connections, and it kind of helps you to become a better listener. And so that's what I ended up learning, being a better listener. It's not about just talking a lot, you know, to try and make friends. It's really about being a good listener. And then from there, and I think this is a little bit similar because I know you spent some time in England too, right? You went
Yeah,
to
well, yeah, I went to Sandhurst, but
Sandhurst.
a
I
little bit
know,
older than you when you were in Malawi.
I know. And so what came out? So what I was going to say is, when I came back for like middle school. I was so I spent 2 years probably staying with my parents, 2-3 years. But then
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting a scholarship to a pretty well-known boarding school, and you know, it's very similar where you get, like, you know, royals and from different parts of the world.
Right.
So I was able to get into that environment. So you know, I didn't spend a lot of time with my parents then. I went to boarding school, and what was good going to boarding school was, again, just being around people from all these different parts of the world. And so one thing that I came to learn and really embrace was the fact that the world is so small at the end. You know, because when you get
Yeah.
exposed to different people, you come to realize, you know, that you know, that, you know, diversity is so beautiful, because people always have, you know, people bring so much from their backstories.
Indeed.
And then the other thing I just came to learn was the same thing, that you know, a lot of the reasons why these kids ended up where they were is because their parents made, you know, decisions and choices in their life that ended up them becoming successful. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's where I really, that kind of inspired me, that, you know, that I want to try to focus on thinking bigger than I used to think at the
Right.
time, that things are possible. But ultimately, you know, you got to, you know, focus on what you can control at the end, and that's doing the work, as far as, you know, whether it's, you know, learning, because I became a really avid reader. So I would read a lot. I would try to be a, you know, a learner, and I would always want to try to keep doing my best. Instead of
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the outcomes, I was just focusing on what I could do. And that sort of became habits for me, like, you know, trying to stay healthy, thinking positive, you know, just continuing to surround myself around people that ultimately sort of help to build me up, versus trying to, like, you know, bring negative energy into my
Yeah.
life.
Couple of questions. So you mentioned that, you know, the fact that you were in Malawi, in Africa, away from your
Yeah.
parents, you decided not to become the victim. You just kind of
Yeah.
accepted that this was your situation. It didn't sound like resignation, you know, oh, woe is me. You just said, well, this is
Yeah.
what it is. And I find that to be a challenge for most people today, right? They find themselves in a, you know, I'm going to call it an unsavory situation, and then they just kind of resign themselves that this is your fate. Outside of just sharing your experience, what specific advice do you have that you could share with them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was ultimately to make a decision in terms of my thoughts, in terms of how I wanted to define the situation, because whether something good or bad happened, it's really hard to know in that moment if it's really good and bad until you actually look at it, maybe from a longer term lens, maybe a year or 2 or 5 years, and then look back and say, maybe it looked really bad in the moment, but it actually was a really good lesson. It really helped, for example, build resilience, or it helped me to learn certain things or become better at something that I might not have if I didn't have to go through that uncomfortable situation. And so, for me, having gone early, been away from my parents, I knew that I had to adopt, right? And so instead of looking at the situation like, why did this happen to me? And I felt sorry for myself. I felt, upset for a while, but then I got over it pretty quickly in a matter of like months, because I started seeing it as an adventure that I don't know why this is happening, but this could be actually really interesting, because now I'm getting to see a whole different part of the world that I never even knew about. I'm getting to meet people that I never would have met ordinarily if I stayed where I was. And so, whenever I go, and so that's kind of been my thinking, that ultimately, anything good or bad that happens, it's really up to us to put the meaning on whether it's good and bad, and then the other thing, I used to, and I've gotten better at this. Before I obviously kind of growing up away from your parents and not being around them, I used to be worried more about what other people would think versus what it was kind of, what I really thought, because I was trying to please people to try and get approval, or just to be, just to have a sense of belonging wherever I was at any given time. But that's another thing that I've been able to, as I've gotten older, I've sort of matured more to the point that you're never going to please anyone all the time anyway. So that's a losing battle. So put that away.
Please yourself,
but,
right?
Yeah. So might as well focus on trying to please yourself from the standpoint of just look at things where, what is it ultimately that I'm looking for, and so for me, I try to sort of define things as, I want to personally continue to grow and, go through different phases of my life where I can continue to look back and it's hard for me to see the growth but it's easier for me to see it when I look at it maybe 5 years back or 10 years. So I started taking a longer view on how to assess a situation versus a shorter view. And I think might help other people, because I mean, that's not to say that bad things don't happen, because they happen all the time, but you sort of change the definition of, it may look bad right now, but what did I learn from this? And then, in a year or 5 years, what may have been bad ends up becoming a blessing in disguise.
Indeed, always, or oftentimes that is the case. So you mentioned, did you say you're a dreamer or a daydreamer? Which one? when you were in elementary school, were you did you say you're a dreamer or a daydreamer?
I was I'm a daydreamer.
Right.
And at the time I would take it, wow, is that good or bad? But now I think about it, it was actually good, because for me, it's sort of dwelling on where I was. I was trying to aspire to, where can I go from this? What can I learn from this? Yeah.
What were some of the things you kind of daydreamed about? I'm curious.
So one thing that I daydreamed about was just having people, just listening to me, and where for some reason, I was always thinking like maybe I'm talking to a crowd of people and people are actually listening to me.
Well, here you are.
But here I am. But that kind of came. I mean, for me, it was a deep sense of insecurity because nobody really paid attention to me growing up. So I had to kind of go out of my way to try and be part of other people's conversations. And so for me, it was that sense of like sadness. So I was always trying to aspire, like, what can I do where, people would actually want to come to me versus I have to keep going to them.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, one thing. Another thing that I would dream about was, like, I mean, everyone sort of has some sort of like, what's the good life look like? It's like, but, and for me, at the time, I never really traveled much, right? Because I was in one place. I was always sort of daydreaming about sort of traveling and visiting all these different countries and meeting all these different people.
Yeah. So, and here you are. So you come back to England and you mentioned, getting the scholarship to go to this boarding school, meeting all these amazing people, different backgrounds, and you made a comment that you had a chance to meet them because their parents made good choices. That kind of implies that your parents didn't make good choices. Is that how you see that?
No. So the way I see that is that a lot of people that I went to school with, by good choices, what I meant was a lot of them actually came from old money being that there was a lot of wealth that was passed down through the generations. So my parents, didn't come from money. So, they did the best with what they had. But the reality is, there's, they worked hard, they weren't educated. They did, but they never really had I mean, it would be unfair for me to expect them to have put me in a situation of what these other kids had because they never had anything handed down to them. So, right. but to your point, for a while I thought like, why can't my parents have done that? You kind of go, I mean, that thought did go through my mind, but eventually you got to realize, for me, I had to realize that, that's very selfish of me to expect them to do something when it wasn't really kind of given down to them. They did the best with what they had. And so, that really sort of helped me actually sort of have a new sense of like respect for what they did. Because sometimes you can obviously get self-absorbed into why can't my parents have all of this other stuff, right? Or why can't I get all of this other stuff like these other kids?
So on that note, Lomit, what have you learned from your parents, or in what ways have they influenced you?
So the biggest way my parents have influenced me is just hard work. They've had a really strong work ethic. As I mentioned, they didn't have a lot to start off with, but I mean, when my dad died actually when I was pretty young, when I was like 18, and what I learned is that based on where he started, he did pretty well considering how short his life was. But the most things that I kind of took from my parents, from my dad, it was that he wasn't like book smart because he never really went to school. He had to. So he was a self learner. So he would read a lot and try to learn things. And that kind of for me, I really came to realize that it doesn't matter if you want to learn something, you can always try to find ways to learn it. So there's no excuse for not learning just because you're not in that environment. For example, no one in my family knows this. You can always go. So I used to spend a lot of time at the library, but a lot of that really came from just watching my dad because he never really used that as an excuse to, okay, I can't do much. With my mom, what I learned was just patience. I mean, she has a very calm demeanor about herself, and you know, and what I came to realize is that, you know, ultimately, you know, people only listen to you if you speak in the right way. So just by shouting or whatever isn't going to
Yeah, I was about
necessarily
to
get
ask you, what do you mean by the right way?
so the right way is always be respectful to
Mm-hmm.
people. You know, always with my mom. What I learned was that no one's better or no one's worse than you. Everybody is the same. Everybody's a human being at the end of the day, and you know, don't don't dwell on what you didn't have. Focus on where you've got the baton at this stage and how far can you take it and leave it for your kids to take it from there. And so family too was, I learned, I mean, for them, everything that they did was really to try and help the family and raise the kids the best they could.
Did that influence, did your relationship with your parents then influence your relationship with your kids, how you related to them?
Yeah. I try to be, I have two boys, and 14 and 10. I try to do my best, for them. But one of the other things that I've had to learn too, the parenting style in the old days is completely different from now too. Before it was like command and control, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
tell you once, and then the second time I'm not going to be telling you, right? You're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. But that style doesn't work now. But what I did learn from is that you got to try and you got to try and motivate and inspire your kids, and so the best way to do that ultimately isn't by telling them what to do. It's by being a good role model. And so that's what I try to do. I try to be a good role model, and I'm also the first to apologize when I fall short, because at the end of the day, I want them to know that, well, this was one thing that I never got from my dad, which was like if he made certain mistakes, he would never own up to it. It would be like brush aside. And what I want to teach my kids is there's power in being in humility. Because ultimately, you want to be able to be vulnerable, so then people, because nobody's perfect. Otherwise, you're just putting a facade out there to
Yeah,
try and cover the real sort of, it's trying to cover your fragile ego to sort of make it seem like you're perfect.
absolutely. You touch on a really important point there, because just today I was speaking about leadership and humility and being vulnerable and using your team as leverage by saying, hey, I don't know this, but maybe you guys may have an idea. And obviously, as a father, as a parent, as parents, we are leaders to our kids. So how do you see the way you choose to parent your boys? How does that translate into the work world as a leader?
Yeah, what I would say is actually being a parent has really helped me to be a better leader and manager, primarily because what I come to realize is that to really inspire and motivate people, you, you have to get them to take ownership on what you want them to do. And it's not that micromanaging them, that go this, go that. What you want to do is try to create a psychologically safe environment where they have trust. The trust really comes from whatever I do, is this person still going to be there for me? Is this person still going to accept me? Or is this conditional love where I have to act in a certain way or do something in a certain way to get approval or not?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I am, like with my kids. I try to set the example that for like if they do something wrong, for example, it's the action and not the person, that doesn't seem like it's the right choice and in this given situation. And I try to like have more of a conversation where let's talk about this. Do you feel this, if you had a situation to redo this, would you make the same choice right now, or would you try to think about it in a different way, knowing the outcome that you got? And, before, I would have been maybe less patient and said, listen, that wasn't good. You got to do it this. But, I've really sort of changed that style, because I realized, like, when I was young, no one really explained anything to me. Either you were doing something right or you're wrong. There was no areas of gray. It was literally, you like, one day you could be a good kid. The next day you could be a bad kid. It's like, what label am I playing for? And so that's the thing I wanted to, and as a leader in the team, you want people to feel like that you want them to aspire to be the best version of themselves. And that really comes from, giving them trust that, I want to try and work with you to try and develop you to your fullest potential. And part of that is just knowing where do they want to go, let them know where you want to go with the business, and how do those things align together, so that if people know what they're doing maps into something bigger than themselves, then I mean, for the most part, that inspires people, because they feel like they're making a contribution. What they're doing matters and it counts. And with my kids, I've tried to instill in them where you can kind of get stuck into a bubble depending on where you live. And the reality is, not everybody has this life, which is why I do a lot of traveling with them, and generally, get them to see how, that ultimately there's people that are more fortunate than you, but there's a lot of people that are less fortunate than you. Right. And at the end of the day, count the blessings that you have, but also think about how you can, make things better for other people, and not just about making things better for yourself.
Indeed. So you spoke about, as a leader, helping to make people the best versions of themselves. And in my mind, the only way you can do that is if you are working to become the best version of yourself, because you can't give what you don't have. So how do you work, Lomit, and becoming the best version of yourself?
So for me, I have this constant mindset that I'm a learner. I'm not sure if you. I always envision myself walking around with an L plate on my shirt, which says I'm a learner, work in progress. But the truth is, what I try to do to make myself better is that I still continue to, like, read a lot. I continue to listen to, I mean, what inspired me when I was young is I used to read a lot of biographies on successful people. And now, with the internet and podcasts and YouTube, there's no excuse. You can literally learn about anything you want. So I'm constantly trying to tweak my mind and learning and putting good things in. I have some daily habits that I do, which is around, exercising every day. I always try to take good care of myself. I eat well, but I also try to mentally, when I wake up, I always try to do some positive visualizations on trying to get my mind connected to attract, good energy for the day. And I always, the other thing that I always try to remind myself is I try to look a picture of myself when I'm young. It's like, like, if I'm being hard on myself, then I'm being hard on that young kid in Malawi. And the truth is, the kid in Malawi did the best with what he was given. And, and so, I with what I've been given right now, just do the best you can. And so at the end of the day, when I go to bed, I always try to reflect, did I give it my best? That's all I can do, because, whatever that best is, as long as I know that I gave it my best, because then, whatever the outcome is something that you can't completely control, because a lot of factors that go into whatever the outcome is, but you can control the input. So you can continue to focus on what you can control, and not get so stressed about things you can't.
How do you handle situations when those moments when the outcome that you get wasn't the one that you wanted? In other words, you experience that dreaded F word, failure.
Yeah. So one of two ways. I can either get very frustrated, or I can turn around and say, "Oh, that didn't kind of work out." But you know what? That was a good lesson, because now, what can I take from this that can make things different next time? But what I will say that really helps with that, because working in startups, and I've worked in startups for 20 years, what people don't realize is, most startups, 95% of startups fail. So, all of these big companies that people hear about now, like, like Google and Apple or Facebook. These are just a small tip of the iceberg that made it. There's a huge iceberg that just never even got to, that succeeded. And so, a big part of what has really helped me too is working in startups is that, you got to, they encourage a lot of risk taking. And my role is around risk taking, because my role is to really work to help companies grow as quickly as possible. And growing involves how we're going to acquire customers, how we're going to retain them, but more importantly, how we're going to be able to generate revenue. And so, companies, and so it's all about tinkering, doing a lot of, experiments, and really trying to figure out if something works or not. But when it doesn't work, nobody remembers that here. I mean, people don't realize, Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and all these people, they've had a lot of failures, but nobody talks about their failures. They only talk about their success. And so that has really helped me too, because living in this environment and working around, you come to really realize a failure could be a blessing in disguise, because it's basically, it forces the company to try something different and try something different and try something and so that's kind of been my mindset. Always be learning, always be trying new things. And you always set aside, whether it's a budget or time, to constantly keep thinking about, 12 to 18 months ahead. What are things that we want to keep trying that can unlock the next opportunity to grow the business and take it to the next level. And I try to do the same thing for myself too. So, so to put it in a different way, I've sort of redefined failure to not call it failure anymore. I just call it, a learning, which is what we call it here anyway. In business, you just call it, it didn't work out, but what did we learn from that? And let's continue to keep moving forward.
Indeed.
So you don't dwell on it too long.
Yeah. How did you get on this path to be working in startups and eventually AI?
Yeah. So I've always been interested in working for startups, primarily because when I was young, I was reading up a lot. I was used to be into technology and just learning about these companies. And the more I read, it really came, to me, the aha moment was that all of these technology companies that had become successful were all startups. Every company starts small. That's one thing that people forget. It doesn't matter. Any business you look at, they all start somewhere, and nobody starts being big. They always start being small. And so, for me, that it seemed exciting to try and work for a company that potentially wants to try and change something in the world to try and make it better, because ultimately startups are trying to solve some kind of problem. And so that's excited me to sort of be part of be part of a company that's trying to change something for the better. And the other thing that I really like about working in startups is that that there's such a high failure rate. So if you can get in early into these startups, you'll be able to learn a lot, because the companies are going to be open to all kinds of ideas. They don't care if the idea is coming from this person or that person or whatever, because everybody is in survival mode. And so it really gives you an opportunity to learn a lot. And that's what I enjoy.
would you define startups?
So startups, for me, I define them as companies that are taking venture capital, and generally it's a tech company, a product or service that potentially has an opportunity to impact a large part of the world, because it impacts a lot of people. But for the most part, it's unproven potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so, once a company takes venture capital, that means that it's got the money to put behind the concept to really prove it out. And that's, for the most part is the way I look at startups. It's like everyone, we all have untapped potential, but we don't really have people backing us up, right? All the time.
That's true. I guess I don't know how silly a question this is, but
yeah,
how does one start a startup, man?
It all starts with writing a business plan, but the idea is,
So you come up with an idea,
yeah,
John has an idea, and you go, oh, I think
yeah. What people don't realize is, like, all of these venture capitalists, they obviously get all of this money from different institutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can't sit on this money, because money doesn't multiply by itself. So they have to take bets. And what they try to do is they're always getting different business plans that are being pitched to them. And then they're trying to make a decision on, do we want to bet on this horse versus that horse? And so, it all starts with having kind of a business plan. And most of these business plans aren't elaborate. They're just like an idea. And if you can take the idea and create some kind of minimal version of whatever that product or service is, and try to, what it will do is they'll give you some capital. You go and sort of prove it. Proof means, can you actually get people that are willing to actually use it or pay you for it, and once you get that, then the question is, how can we take this and grow it really quickly before somebody else comes and copies that idea, right? Which is why then they start giving you a lot more money to grow it.
So one of my favorite shows to watch is The Prophet with Marcus Lemonis, and he talks about product, people, process. That's what he looks for when he goes into a business to save it. You have definitely cut your teeth as an advisor to startups. So you mentioned you like to get in there early. So is there anything in particular you're looking for to get involved in and behind a startup?
Yeah, one thing I sort of, a couple of things, and I think people is really important, because when you start a startup, teams are going to be really, really small. So you got to make sure that, are these people that you can really get along with and you can work well with? And the other thing you want to know is, are these people that are willing to do whatever it takes to be successful? It's because, there's so much that's going to come against you. You got to make sure that at least the people that you get in on the boat with are going to be able to withstand the storms that come against you, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing with the product, most founders, it's just like parents always think their child is the best or whatever, but you got to take like an objective view and kind of do your own due diligence to really see, does this thing really meet a need that can address that people are going to value, so I think product is very important, people, but beyond that, ultimately, to grow these businesses, you want to get the right investors to invest in there. So I always look at, who are the investors that are actually putting money in there, because generally, if you get the right investors that invest into a business, they bring more than just money. They bring relationships that can open up opportunities for you to kind of go and do deals with other businesses that can propel your growth. And if you bring in the wrong investors, then they can end up becoming more of a hindrance than a propeller to driving growth.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to something you just said. People, when they always think that their idea is the best idea ever, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's true. Whether it's product or an idea for a service or, whatever, you pick an idea out of the ether. How do we get past that? How do we get over ourselves? Because we all think, because I thought of this idea, it's the best idea ever. How do we get past that?
Best way to get past that is to really get feedback from people that really use the product, and today it's very easy to get that feedback, because most people, if you put a product or service out there, people write user reviews, right? So you can get user feedback from reviews. You can do some research, bring people in to try the product, and actually ask them the right questions, so you're not leading to bring any biases into how you want them to respond. That's another way to get some feedback.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important thing at the end of the day is, once you put a product out there, is someone actually willing to invest either their time or money to use it? Because that's the currency of success, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because companies can make money either if you spend enough time in a product. They can monetize your time on advertising, right? That's what companies like Facebook do. Or they can monetize you by you spending money to actually pay to use that product, which is like buying an iPhone like Apple does, or paying for apps subscriptions.
Yeah. So as we close, I guess I have a two-parter, and it would be what, from your experience working with startups, man, we didn't even get into AI.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have another conversation, man.
Yeah.
I think we could spend an entire show talking about any one
Yeah.
of the subjects that we spoke on.
Yeah.
Actually, before I even ask that final question, AI obviously plays a huge role in our lives today, but I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety as well, because people think that robots are going to come and take our jobs. And, I've read of call it, smart robots who are learning and as they go along. And so there's this fear that maybe robots will even eventually get so smart that they start to control us. Allay our fears, Lomit.
So what I would say is that, these stories sell well, right? When you make movies about how scary the world could be with robots, or if you do news stories, those kinds of headlines get a lot of attention. But the reality is, artificial intelligence was created by human intelligence. So let's not forget who's creating this technology. It's created by people to really help people at the end of the day. And just like anything else, if you look back, machines or technology is really there to try and help humans, make their lives better. Whether it's for a business, it's going to either try to help you to be more productive, or to try and help you make more money or save money. Those are kind of the realms of why people would use AI, artificial intelligence. But where AI is now becoming more popular is because there's a lot of data that really ends up driving artificial intelligence. And humanly, it's not possible to try and take all of this data, because everything you do now, people are getting data points on everything that you do, because you spend so much of your time on your phone or on a device. All of this data is out there. Humanly, it's very hard to process all of this data. So artificial intelligence can help process data a lot better than humans, and surface insights. But ultimately, it's up to a human to really figure out, does that action make sense to take or not? And so I don't think artificial intelligence is necessarily going to take jobs away, but what it's going to do, it's going to require a different set of skills that all of us as humans have to continue to try and, in this world where artificial intelligence should probably do more of the rudimentary, mundane tasks and processes, but then the humans will be able to sort of look at that and make decisions on, what are the right predictions, if the machine's even making the right predictions or not, because the machine at the end of the day is only as good as the humans that are supporting it.
Yeah, so that's, you just touched on a point that I wanted to bring up, because there is this fear, and we see it happening today, where you go to the supermarket, for example, and you don't have a cashier, you're self-checking out, right? So that's AI. But you make a really good point, and I think it's one that is worth really emphasizing, the fact that, although we may have robots, let's say, taking or doing jobs that we would normally do, it's incumbent on us as human beings to grow, to go learn new things, develop new skills and abilities, because that's what we're really created to do, to continue to grow, right? And as you said, it's a human mind that created these things. And so we have the ability to continue to evolve and grow.
That's right.
So,
and
go ahead, sorry.
And I was going to say, just like with anything with technology, there's always good and bad use cases, right?
Yeah.
So it's really up to us to.
Is there going to be a Dr. Evil, or is that the movie?
No, that could be a good James Bond movie, right? No, but what I feel is that, that with AI, it's up to the humans to really ensure that the technology is being used for good and not for, negative consequences.
Completely.
Yeah.
I agree. What would you say, as we wind down, is perhaps the top lesson you have learned through working with AI or advising startups, and what piece of advice would you have for a young buck, well, somebody who has a startup idea?
So I would say ultimately have a bias to action. That means, you can write and talk about things, but ultimately try to get something out there, try to get some proof of concept, and just try to take some action to really validate the idea to see if it's going to work or not. And generally, we spend so much time trying to analyze scenarios that we can talk ourselves out of even doing stuff at the end. So, try not to get so much into kind of the analysis paralysis phase, where you're just kind of looking at all of these situations like, is this going to work or not? Just try to put it out there and try to get some real data, And then I would say with startups, ultimately it's not the best product that necessarily wins. It's really about the best way to, it's about the teams that end up executing the best. That's what it comes down to. Just like with anything, you could have the greatest idea, but if you don't have the right process or the right people to execute on it, then you could still not end up becoming successful. So focus less on just trying to get the perfect idea or the perfect product. Just try to get the concept and put it out there, and focus more on the executing, where you can continue to pivot and modify that and turn it into something better. Because whatever that version 1.0 is of any product, it's never going to stay 1.0. Just like us, the way I was when I was like 5 years old is different from when I'm going to be 50, because you just have to naturally evolve and grow based on where you are. And the same thing happens with products too. So people, I would say, generally just put a lot of pressure of trying to be perfect right from the start. Don't look for perfection. Just look for direction. Just keep putting it out there and keep iterating.
I've heard that one before. Don't look for perfection, look for direction. I absolutely love that. I love the idea of behind this, having a bias for action, because without that, you can sit there trying to be perfect, trying to have the perfect product on the market and never gets to the market because perfection is unattainable. I love the analogy of, version 5.0 versus 50.0, because you're right.
Yeah.
We're all evolving, man. Dude, you've dropped some wisdom on us today, man. And like I said earlier, we could actually spend the entire time speaking on any one facet of our conversation today. So I'm kind of looking forward to us reconnecting and continuing the conversation. But Lomit, your life, everything that you have done, your philosophy definitely epitomizes the keep on pushing philosophy. And for that, we thank you for the example that you have shown and continue to demonstrate, and for choosing to come share some of that wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, man.